Hey everybody, welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe. And as always, I'm ready to dive into some seriously juicy info with you all today. It's like we're mixing up a knowledge cocktail here. Strong stuff, but oh, so smooth going down.
And I'm Sunny, your friendly neighborhood fact checker. I'll make sure we get all the ingredients right. Speaking of mixing things up, you know it's always a good blend? Travel whiskey and discovering awesome new things. You have to check out our friend Micky's YouTube channel, Mickytolife.
Yeah, Mickey's the best. He's always got something cool going on.
All right, so you guys sent in some really interesting stuff this week, like seriously thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going deep, deep, deep this time into, well, national security laws.
Ooh, interesting.
Right. But it gets even better. We're looking at how different countries handle this stuff, Specifically what they do when people, express opinions, let's say.
Bro, I'm hooked already.
See, we've got this whole case of Johnny Somali, you remember him, right? The guy who got into some hot water over in South Korea.
Oh, yeah, vaguely.
And it just got us thinking, what if all that went down here in the U.S.? Or even in Taiwan, with all that's going on over there.
Different places, different rules, right?
Exactly. So buckle up, folks. This is going to be a wild ride. We're going to try to figure this whole national security thing out.
I'm all for it. Let's unravel this mess, this comparison between South Korea, the U.S., and Taiwan. It's like a masterclass in global legal perspective, seriously.
All right, so first things first. Johnny Somali in South Korea, from what we've gathered, he basically went on a cultural exchange tour gone wrong.
Diplomatic incident, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. We're talking messing with a comfort woman's statue, causing a ruckus at a convenience store, ramen and loud music, the classic combo.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. And then, blasting North Korean propaganda on public transport. Talk about not making friends.
Yeah, not exactly winning hearts and minds, is he?
Nope. And the South Korean authorities, they weren't too thrilled, let's just say that.
So what are we looking at here? What kind of trouble is he actually in?
Serious trouble. Up to 10 years in prison across 4 separate charges, 2 counts of obstruction of business, each one carrying a maximum 5-year sentence, plus 2 more charges under something called the Minor Offender Act.
Wow. So those are directly tied to his actions, the incidents themselves. But what about South Korea's, the NSA? Their national security law.
Ah, good point. Right, that's the big question, isn't it? How does the NSA play into all of this? I mean, we know it's mainly there to protect them, especially from, North Korea, right?
Absolutely. And, the initial charges are all about those very public, very disruptive actions he took. But digging a little deeper, the material suggests there might be another legal angle here. They could potentially hit him with a charge related to, get this, national security intelligence crimes.
National security. What now?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. Basically, it's about failing to report crimes that threaten national security. Falls under Article 10 of the NSA.
Hold on. Failure to report. So if he knew something shady was going down and didn't say anything, that's another 5 years on top of everything else.
It is. It is. Article 10 of South Korea's NSA, up to 5 years in prison or a hefty fine. We're talking 2 million Korean. 1, roughly $15,000 USD, all for not reporting certain violations of the NSA. It covers things like espionage and certain activities tied to anti-government organizations. It really highlights how seriously they take national security, especially when it comes to North Korea, which, kind of overshadows those broad free speech protections we see in other places.
Whoa. Okay. So this law, it applies to everyone on their turf, right? Even tourists like Johnny Boy.
Bingo. They operate on something called territorial jurisdiction. It's pretty standard, really. If you're within their borders, you play by their rules, no matter where your passport's from.
So no funny business while you're on vacation. Got it.
Exactly. And it's important to remember the historical context here. I mean, the NSA, it's straight out of the Cold War, mainly aimed at countering North Korean threats. Obviously, it's not used as often these days, but it has been criticized, for potentially squashing free speech, especially anything to do with North Korea.
Squashing free speech, huh?
Yeah, remember that Rose Soo-hee case?
Yeah.
The guy who just visited North Korea without permission and got arrested?
Seriously. Just for visiting.
Yep. It's all it took.
Wow. So even setting foot in the North could get you in deep trouble. All right, another hypothetical here. What if someone in South Korea starts, openly preaching North Korean politics? Is that an NSA no-no, too?
Or absolutely. Promoting North Korean politics. Straight to NSA jail. Potentially up to 7 years. And again, doesn't matter if you're local or just passing through. On top of that, they've got Article 98 in their criminal code, specifically about spying for an enemy state, which right now means North Korea. That one's way more serious. We're talking possible death penalty or at least 7 years behind bars.
No kidding. So they really don't mess around when it comes to North Korea, huh?
Not even a little bit.
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute. Imagine Johnny Somali doing his thing, or even just, loudly declaring his love for some foreign leader right there in Times Square. Would he be facing the same kind of heat here in the U.S.?
Now, that's a great question. See, here's where things get really interesting. The short answer, probably not. The First Amendment, the one about free speech?
Yeah.
It's pretty much a big fat no to jailing someone just for speaking their mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. You see all kinds of interesting opinions being aired out here, sometimes pretty loudly, too. But there's got to be a line somewhere, right? Like, you can't just say anything you want and get away with it.
Oh, there are definitely lines you can't cross.
Mm-hmm.
But they're very specific and usually tied to actual illegal actions, not just words. Like, if your speech is directly connected to, let's say, espionage or treason, then, yeah, you're in trouble.
Treason, huh? That's the big one, like betraying your country, right? But what does it actually mean, legally speaking?
Well, according to the U.S. Code, Title 18, Section 2381, to be precise, treason is basically waging war against the United States or siding with its enemies, giving them aid and comfort. And the penalty, it's not pretty. Could be death or at least 5 years in prison, plus a massive fine. But the important thing is, it's not just about, saying you kind of like the enemy. You have to actually betray your country.
Okay, so actions speak louder than words, basically. What about sedition? I hear that word tossed around a lot these days. What's the deal with that?
Right. Sedition, that's Title 18, Section 2384. Basically, it's about plotting to overthrow the U.S. government by force, trying to stop them from doing their job, inciting a rebellion, that sort of thing. You're looking at up to 20 years in prison for that. Again, the key is it's about actions, actual conspiracies to do illegal stuff, not just having an unpopular opinion.
Got it. Okay, now I'm curious about the Espionage Act. That one's all about limiting what people can say, right?
Right. It has been used to restrict speech, yeah? Especially during wars, when the government was worried about information leaking out and helping the enemy. But these days, using it against someone just for expressing an opinion in peacetime, that's a tough sell. It faced major pushback because of the First Amendment. It's more about, actually stealing or sharing sensitive defense secrets illegally. Though it's important to know about the debates around using it against dissent during wartime. It's part of understanding how it works now.
Right. History matters. Okay, last one, I promise. What if someone's getting paid by a foreign government to spread their propaganda? Is that a no-no?
That's where airy gun comes in. The Foreign Agents Registration Act. Basically, if you're working for a foreign government or political group and you're doing political stuff, you got to register with the Department of Justice and tell them what you're up to. It's about transparency, making sure people know where the information's coming from. It's not about banning the speech itself, just making sure the foreign connection is out in the open. And then there's the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act, which is all about, countering foreign propaganda. But again, it's not aimed at individual citizens or visitors.
So it sounds like here in the U.S., Johnny Boy could probably stand on a soapbox and sing the praises of any leader he wants, as long as he's not actually spying for them or plotting to overthrow the government.
You got it. The bar for restricting speech here is sky high, thanks to that First Amendment. Looking back at what Johnny Somali did, yeah, it was offensive, sure. But would it trigger national security laws here in the U.S. like it might in South Korea? Probably not.
Makes sense. All right, let's hop on over to Taiwan now. They're in a pretty, let's be real, a tense situation with China. Big geopolitical elephant in the room, right? What are their national security laws like? If Johnny Somali pulled his shenanigans there, what would happen?
Taiwan's in a unique spot. Much like South Korea, they've got national security laws, specifically geared toward, let's call it their main rival, mainland China.
Yeah.
Espionage, sabotage, sedition, that kind of stuff. It's all about protecting themselves. It's a delicate balancing act, right? Safeguarding their sovereignty while, maybe having to put some limits on what people can say or do, especially when it comes to China. So if Johnny Somali started causing trouble there, promoting the ideology of, what Taiwan sees as a hostile force, yeah, he'd be in hot water.
So what exactly could they charge him with? What are we talking about here?
Okay, so based on what we have under their National Security Act, specifically Article 2, which is all about spying for foreign entities like China, Hong Kong, Macau, you name it, hostile forces. Basically, he could be looking at 1 to 7 years in prison, plus a potential fine of up to 10 million new Taiwan dollars. And then there's Article 92 of their criminal code, specifically dealing with espionage for a foreign state. That one, much harsher. We're talking death penalty, life imprisonment, or at least 5 years.
Yikes. Okay, so they also take spying very, very seriously. What about that failure to report thing we talked about with South Korea? Does Taiwan have something similar?
It's not a mirror image, but they do have Article 11 in their National Security Act, which covers something called special dereliction of duty. If someone knowingly doesn't report something that could hurt national security, it could apply. We're talking 3 to 10 years in prison.
Okay, so keeping secrets can also land you in big trouble. Now, this is where things get really interesting and maybe a little sensitive. What about Chinese spouses living in Taiwan? Like, what if they openly support mainland China's policies or ideology? With all the tension and, President Lai Ching-te basically calling China a hostile force, plus all the military stuff going on, could they get in legal trouble for just expressing their views?
That's a complex one for sure. Under Taiwan's National Security Act, specifically Articles 2 and 7, which focus on activities related to China and potentially even their criminal code, anyone in Taiwan, including Chinese spouses, could face penalties if they're seen as doing things like espionage, promoting a hostile entity's agenda in a way that hurts Taiwan's security, or trying to undermine Taiwan's sovereignty. It could be hefty fines or even prison time, depending on what they actually did or said. And with Taiwan seeing China as a hostile force, backed up by those military threats and exercises, any activity like that would be under a microscope. The big question would be, are they truly posing a threat to national security, like actively working to undermine the Taiwanese government or society for Beijing, or just expressing personal opinions? Big difference.
So even just voicing certain political opinions could cross a line if it's seen as helping an enemy. That's a tough one to navigate.
It really is. It shows you the struggle between keeping a country safe and letting people speak their minds, especially when things are already tense.
Are there any other laws in Taiwan we should keep in mind?
Article 3 of Taiwan's National Security Act deals with sabotage, stuff like stealing important tech, stuff that's critical for national security, penalties for that. 5 to 12 years in prison and massive fines, and Article 90 of their criminal code. That's about sedition, trying to undermine the government through violence. Death penalty or at least 7 years in prison. Oh, and one more thing. Just like in South Korea, these national security laws, they apply to foreigners too. Territoriality, remember.
No escaping the law no matter where you go. So if we're putting it all together, it seems like South Korea and Taiwan are way stricter about national security and speech than the U.S.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. They've got legal systems that give the government more power to control what people say and do if they think it's a threat to national security. And it's crystal clear. Those laws apply to everyone within their borders, citizen or not.
Right. No exceptions. This whole deep dive really makes you think, different parts of the world, different ideas about how to balance keeping things safe and letting people speak freely. And in a world that's so connected but also so divided politically, it's a conversation that's not going away anytime soon.
Makes you think twice about where you travel and where you live, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It raises some really important questions, like how do we strike that balance? What does it mean for people living in these places or just visiting?
Lots to think about. Food for thought, folks.